And welcome everyone once again to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacy.
And my name is Phil Thompson, and we bring you this podcast every week. We've been doing this for like 20 years. And, well, not the podcast, but maybe 15 years now for the podcast? Something like that. Not quite.
Not that
But
long.
we were doing video stuff, about 10 years ago? We were ahead of our time. We were doing video podcasts, right?
Yes, we were.
All right, good enough. So we're a tech company, but we like to help churches. That's what we do. That's all we do is help churches for the most part. And we have a lot of experience in ministry. In fact, our whole team has a lot of experience. And so we will talk about lots of things, not just tech related things. But today we are doing a tech related interview. And we have with us today, if you're watching on the video part of this, we have George Herbert with us. Hi, George. How are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
Great. It's nice to have you on. We've had you on before. George is our guest today, and George works for Epiphan. And George, you've been there close to 10 years now in customer support, right?
Getting very close to 10 years, yeah.
Wow. What are you going to do on your 10-year anniversary?
I don't know. Hopefully not get a gold watch, but we'll see. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to it soon.
All right, good. So we're going to talk a little bit about what Epiphan is, the products, and get a little bit of George too. But George, you guys, the company's been around for a while, and we're talking to you. You're up in the Toronto area right now, right?
A little farther east in Ottawa, Canada. Yeah, nation's capital of Canada.
Yeah, that's right. And then there's also an office in California.
Correct. Yeah, we have some of our sales team and business development out of Palo Alto, California.
Awesome. Good deal. So how you've been working with tech stuff here. I mean, give us a little bit about who you are. I mean,
Sure.
Who is George Herbert?
Well, some say that I'm the face of Epiphan these days because I do a lot of these things. I do a lot of media, do a lot of our own marketing video stuff. Not really a title I put on myself, but it kind of happens. But I've been doing tech stuff myself for a long time since I was a teenager, kind of just entering the workforce, working for various high-tech companies here in the Ottawa area, whether it's, the Alcatels of the world, big tech companies like that, HP, things along those lines, and eventually found my way to Epiphan, and now manage the support team here and more. So yeah, it's been an interesting journey, and that's kind of come together to be here and do these interesting things that change every day, whether it's podcasts or support calls.
Right, there you go. I love your support, and that's one of the things that Steve and I are real big on with our company is support, customer support. I think we probably have both been emotionally scarred by poor customer support in our past.
You used them last week, was it, Phil, or 2
I
weeks
did.
ago?
Yeah, it was a week or two
Put
ago.
to the test.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you guys, we've had a relationship with you guys for a while. In fact, we're giving away one of your products for people that stream with us, and it's the Webcaster X2, which we'll talk about. We also want to talk about some other products as well. But we had a customer that just, we sent them a Webcaster X2 for streaming video. It's a live encoder, which we'll talk about what it is in a moment. And they were having, they're having an issue, and I was like, it was very unique. So I thought, you know what, let's just get on the horn here with Epiphan support. And we got, I think it was Adam. Was it Adam?
Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
And Adam pretty much knew what the problem was right away. Our customer wasn't, how can I say this? He didn't exactly argue with him, but he was like, no, that can't be the problem. And finally we got around to actually investigating if what Adam said was really the issue. And sure enough, Adam was right on. Yeah. And he was very patient. Adam was very patient, very understanding. And so it solved the problem. And and actually what Adam brought up, I hadn't actually thought of before. And so it was really good to have him on. So we love your support. So
yeah, it's something we pride ourselves on. It's very important to us. And, there's a lot of companies out there that do some things similar to what we do, some things a bit different. But one thing we strive for is to make sure that one of the main standouts is what we offer from a customer experience, and making sure that our support is, industry leading as much as possibly can be, and make sure that, we have those quick answers as best we can, and get it done quickly, and most importantly, have knowledgeable staff that have a very deep knowledge base across multiple things. Just to kind of point that out, I have one guy on my support staff who normally you would think they're just somebody who can talk on the phone and they've been trained up for our specific products. Well, no, I hired this guy because he's an audio engineer, because I need that experience on my team to serve our customers better. So just as an example. That's
awesome. All right. So the reason we have you on today is because, we work with churches. We do streaming video with streamingchurch.tv, and you guys have some really great live encoder products. And one of them, as I said, we're giving away the Webcaster X2. So tell us. Let's start with the Webcaster X2,
sure.
And then there's a couple other ones about it. And you guys work with churches as well. Why is this such a good thing? Because there's different live encoders. There's software-based encoders, vMix, Wirecast, all sorts of them. But why is the Epiphan Webcaster X2 such a good suggestion or a good fit for a church?
So the main thing is the simplicity of it. One of the biggest challenges in my experience, and I think you guys could probably echo this, is oftentimes in churches, they come in different shapes and sizes. And one thing that's often very true, regardless of the shape or size, most of the time they're being operated by volunteers, not necessarily AV professionals. And so for us, we want to make sure that we have a product that's easy to use, very simple to configure, kind of once it's set up and integrated with Streaming Church, for example, that everything is just done. It's just very, very straightforward, so that basically anybody can learn how to use it very quickly and easily. When you start looking at applications like a vMix or a Wirecast, they're great applications, and we have USB capture cards that are awesome complements to those software packages as well. But they're very complicated. It's not something that you can just hand off to anybody who's never touched encoding software before. You have to have, some sort of experience, some sort of practice to really get the most out of those applications. And many times that's overkill, I think, for what a lot of the smaller churches especially are looking for. They're just looking to get live on, whether it's Facebook or YouTube or Streaming Church or whatever platform they're using, just get there as quickly and as easily and as low cost as possible. Here in Canada, most churches are registered charities, which usually means they're broke, right? So it's, doing
the same
things
here.
Well, exactly. And so doing things as low cost but as effective as possible are really important for everybody. And so, that's kind of the goal of the Webcaster, is to provide a simple, easy to use solution for a wide variety of customers. And it is a low cost device, and very, very easy to use, and trying to integrate with strong partners to make that workflow even easier.
So you don't have one handy, do you? There,
I don't actually.
I should have pulled one. I have it, and it's somewhere in one of my. I should have brought it out here. I'm sorry. It's really small.
Yeah, if that's the other thing, is that it's like, small enough
that
a lot of people, I've seen it installed in a number of churches where the church was designed and built up, they have their audio booth and everything's already set and fixed. The idea of trying to add in a large complicated video system, they just physically don't have the room in the booth typically. The Webcaster is so small. It's maybe 4 inches by 4 inches. It's very, very small. It could easily just tuck in somewhere and seamlessly integrate with other equipment without kind of having to redesign the whole booth.
Yeah. So it's, I don't know, I'd describe maybe a deck of cards or 2 deck of cards set right next to each other. Is about the size of the Webcaster, and it's as you mentioned, it's really simple. So it's going to take an HDMI input, which is what's commonly coming out of most cameras, and then it just connects to your internet. So that's pretty much all you do. You got a power supply plug for it, and it's really simple.
I was talking to a customer last week who had just purchased a Webcaster X2, and she was just looking for some guidance on the walkthrough on setting it up initially, and right off the bat admitted, I'm not a technical person at all, so take it easy on me. We had her up and running in no time, and she was just using a very inexpensive, I think it was a $200 handy cam kind of thing. And they had previously been using a laptop with a webcam to do the same job. And as soon as she saw the quality difference between even just that $200 Handycam and the Webcaster compared to what they had been doing before, it just blew her mind. She couldn't believe that just being able, just the optical zoom of even an inexpensive camera compared to trying to do it with a webcam, or some people try to do it with smartphones. The difference just in that is huge. And that's, again, the enablement of the Webcaster from HDMI really opens that door. Maybe it's a $200 camera, maybe it's a $2,000 camera. Either way, it's going to work really, really well.
Yeah. And you can send, we've got customers that use digital switchers, digital video switchers, and they've got multiple cameras, and they send everything to the switcher and then into the Webcaster. And it works really well. Lots of good products there. All right, so you've got the Webcaster X2, which is around $300, right?
Yep.
That's about what it is. We're actually giving those to new customers with streamingchurch.tv. But you've also got some other things. In fact, we've got one customer that's, I think, got the Pearl. There's an Epiphan Pearl 2. Is that who we have?
Yeah.
Is it?
I think they have the Pearl Mini, one of them.
Yeah.
We're thinking of the same one, Phil. I'm not sure.
Well, we have two. So we have what we refer to now as the Pearl family of encoders. Essentially a very similar idea to something like a Webcaster, just kind of a lot bigger, a lot more powerful, and kind of more things packed into one standalone box. So we have the Pearl Mini and the Pearl 2. The Webcaster, as we've been talking about, has the single HDMI input. Some people might put a switcher in front of that. With the Pearl Mini, you could take either an SDI input, which in some cases is going to be a little stronger for distance cabling, if things have to be kind of separated a little bit. But it also has HDMI inputs, and you can.
That's a lot stronger, right? I mean, with regard to, you can run SDI. Do you know these specs? I never can.
It's 300 something feet or more. I mean, it's a long way.
Yeah, whereas HDMI is only like 6 to 10 or so, right?
Yeah, you can stretch 50 feet if you spend a fortune on a high quality cable, but or maybe 100 feet if you really spend money on a fiber cable. But those are delicate, so they're not always the best thing to put in the hands of volunteers either. But something like SDI is an extremely durable cable that can run much, much longer, locking BNC connectors, so no one's going to trip and unplug it accidentally, things like that. But with the Pearl Mini, you can bring in multiple inputs from HDMI and then the SDI, and then do your own mixing and switching all in one box. And it has a touch screen built into it to control all of that. You can record and stream simultaneously, stream to multiple platforms if you want, but of course, really, it should only be to Streaming Church. But
exactly, well said.
We'll have Facebook in there too. We get a lot of churches, us and Facebook.
But the nice part is sometimes having that local record and the stream, and you can actually do separate encodes at the same time on a Pearl, so that your local record could maybe be a much higher quality recording versus what you were streaming. One of the things we run into a lot, and I'm sure you guys know this better than I do even, sometimes churches don't have the best internet connections, and bandwidth is obviously critical for live streaming. So being able to do sort of two different versions of the same thing on the fly, a high quality record and maybe a lower bandwidth stream, and maybe you'll take that record and post it to YouTube later, but just to get things going, it kind of helps to be able to multitask essentially, and that's something that's very difficult on smaller solutions, or software-based solutions don't always offer you that same flexibility. And then we also have the Pearl 2, which is the big brother. So it can take up to 4 4K inputs or 6 HD inputs, and it can do 6 simultaneous encodes and different all kinds of things. So it supports chroma keying if you want to play with green screens, and supports NDI now if people want to use NDI cameras instead of using HDMI or SDI feeds. So maybe the more sophisticated installations that have strong networks in the church might use NDI cameras as that becomes more popular with PTZ cameras and things like that. So yeah, it's we have a product for basically everyone. It's just a question of scale. We do have what some people might refer to as a mega church. We do have some customers who are using the Pearl 2 in those environments. We have some medium-sized churches who use the Pearl Mini, and then we have a lot of churches that use the Webcaster X2. I think of all the many Webcasters we've sold in the US, I think something around 80% of them have gone to churches, and it's a lot of units. So 80% is even more impressive because it's a lot of sales.
Wow. So as you walked through that lineup, give me kind of a summary overview. If I'm I guess you kind of laid it out here. If I'm a larger church of, I don't know, it's a relative term, but 1,000 or more on a Sunday and a weekend, and I may go, or it's probably based on cameras, right?
Yeah.
The number of cameras that I have would be a key factor.
Yeah, it's not so much the size of the congregation, it's more the sophistication of the AV setup and what you want to throw at it. There's definitely some very, very large churches who might bring in a couple thousand people on a Sunday, but there's just shooting a single camera. And in that case, the Webcaster is perfectly acceptable. There's some smaller churches that want to be very sophisticated in their AV setup, possibly because their online audience is larger than what they bring in on a Sunday morning into the church itself. So they might do a 3 or 4 or 5 camera setup with a lot more sophisticated audio. And I think especially the churches that have a heavy focus on more contemporary style worship with the larger bands and things like that, they tend to use a lot more cameras because they want to have different angles and different shots for different components of the band. So when you start going to that level where you might have 4, 5, 6 cameras or something along those lines, then the Pearl 2 is a good option. Or you could always use a switcher in front of one of the smaller encoders too.
So, and Pearl Mini accepts how many inputs?
Pearl Mini can accept 2 to 3, depending on how you're leveraging the unit, and then Pearl 2 can take up to 6.
All right. Well, let's talk audio real quick.
Sure.
You mentioned audio. What are my audio input options? What's that look like?
So in the Webcaster, generally, it focuses on taking embedded audio over HDMI. So in most cases, people are running the audio from maybe their soundboard through the camera and then HDMI into the Webcaster. It does have options of using USB-based audio. So some people might use a USB sound card or something like that to bring in the audio from their soundboard as well. So things like the Blue Icicle, that little adapter, or Focusrite Scarlett, boxes like that can bring in the professional audio from their soundboard over USB. When we look at the Pearl family, that's where things really start to get more sophisticated. The Pearl Mini has 2 XLR TRS combo jacks on it, so the 1/4-inch TRS or XLR, and they can be either line level or mic level, and they can even provide phantom power or not, and they can be balanced stereo pair or separate mono. The advantage there is that if you're taking line level from your main audio board over XLR, balanced stereo pair, you're getting that perfect professional level audio all the way through. No adapters, no fancy stuff, just XLR cables that everyone's already used to. Mm. Or maybe it's a small scale event. Maybe for some reason you're doing something outside of the church on one particular Sunday. Maybe it's the church picnic or something, and you want to do a special event. Switching it into that microphone level mode, turning on phantom power, you could run 2 microphones directly off the Pearl Mini without any preamp or mixer or anything else involved. So for the smaller scale event, it literally can be the only piece you need with a camera and a couple microphones. So it definitely gives you a lot more flexibility from a professional standpoint.
So I'm not an AV guy, but I've always wondered this question, and I'm going to show my ignorance, I guess. What is the difference between line level and mic level?
I mean, essentially, mic level has no preamp, so there's not a lot of gain to it. It's not a lot. It's very, very quiet. Okay. So if you plug that into something that is expecting a higher signal, you're just not going to hear anything. Essentially, if it's something designed for only line level.
Oh,
so
okay.
The Pearl 2, for example, is built for only line level because it's normally used with a larger infrastructure, but it has 4 XLR inputs on it. So you could do 4 mono or 4 balance or 2 balanced stereo pairs, but it is line level. So it's a bit of a different workflow usually once you get to the bigger units. As usually there's already things going on there.
So, and within the different models, are there options? I mean, do I get a Pearl Mini that's my, like I'm buying a different car, what trim level do you have? Are there different trim levels, or are they all is it just I get a Pearl Mini and I get a Pearl Mini, or do I get a Pearl Mini with?
On the Webcaster, the Pearl Mini, it is just the one model
Okay.
in those. With Pearl 2, there's 2 different variants. There's the base version, if you will, which is full HD capable. And then there is an upgraded trim level, if you will, that supports 4K. So if someone was looking for 4K capture and streaming and recording, then there is that option on the Pearl 2. The interesting thing is that if someone were to buy a base version of the Pearl 2 today, because they don't need 4K at the moment, but 6 months from now decided they needed 4K, for an additional cost, they can do that upgrade without changing the hardware. So it's something that they can progress to if they need to, but maybe today save a bit of cash up front, and maybe they'll never need it. We give them that option there.
So to speak to this as well, there's the AV guys that, or maybe not even the AV guys, everybody, they hear these terms getting thrown out. Initially it was HD and 1080p, and then now it's 4K. Mm-hmm. And so everyone's like, well, that's the latest and greatest. I want to stream in 4K. And I can't even imagine. I don't know. We don't have any of our customers that coming anywhere near that, because you need some serious fiber upload, I assume, to stream in 4K. And then the people watching won't be able to watch it unless they've got some incredible download. So do you get people saying, well, I need the 4K. 4K is the latest. I need to get to 4K. I want to stream 4K.
Absolutely. Yeah.
How do you talk them down to say, no, you really don't?
Well, I mean, it depends. We definitely have some customers that use it very heavily. And some people don't. It's unnecessary. And again, it depends on what their end-to-end workflow is. So, in the case of a church, I would highly doubt they would need 4K unless they just really want it as a show off. Because one of the things about streaming 4K is, absolutely, it requires a lot more bandwidth, which just means more expensive internet connections. But if you really have to look at your average viewer, most people today, when they're viewing live streams, the majority of viewers are on a mobile device, an iPad, a smartphone. They're not viewing 4K. It's irrelevant. They wouldn't even notice if it's the difference between 720p and 1080p from the HD world. So 4K is really not that important for those consumers currently. Now, if someone wanted to load it up on a brand new 4K TV, maybe in an overflow room inside the church itself, that might be a different piece. And we definitely have customers doing that.
Right.
The other advantage of 4K that we see with the Pearl 2 customers a lot is 4K cameras have gotten so cheap that you might as well buy one anyways sometimes. If you're already spending in the $1,000, $2,000 range, HD and a 4K camera are pretty much the same in that range. So one of the things we can do with the Pearl 2 is take that 4K camera as an input and then use the Pearl 2 cropping function to essentially punch in almost virtual zoom into 1080 chunks of it. So you can almost create a fake multi-camera shoot by using this 1080 crop in sections and then stream it and record it in 1080 so that you're not just wasting bandwidth, but leverage a single fixed 4K camera, but make it seem like it's much more. This is a bit of a production trick, and we do have a lot of customers doing that in churches, but also in other similar live event venues, auditoriums, and that sort of thing, where it's a big space, but they don't want to go to 6 cameras, but they want to kind of fake it. So 4K can help it with that sort of setup.
Interesting.
Is there, when I move to a 4K camera, am I still using the same cabling, SDI or HDMI?
Yeah, typically it depends on the camera. Most of them are going to be HDMI with SDI gets a little more complicated because there's different versions of SDI. The most common one people will see is 3G SDI, which is full HD. For 4K, though, you're starting to look at 12G SDI. So there is slightly different cabling standard for that, and different cameras will have different support for it. So that's still more of a bleeding edge technology at the moment, but it's starting to pick up. Canon has finally a very affordable 12G SDI based camera. So
good deal. So we're running out of time here, unless you got a quick follow-up.
I have a quick question. We mentioned the cost of the webcaster. Let's mention the Pearl Mini and the Pearl 2. Sure. What's the average cost?
Yeah, so we are looking at a fairly substantial jump in cost between something like the webcaster and the Pearl Mini even. And certainly the Pearl Mini does far more than the webcaster can as well. So the webcaster retail MSRP is $299, $300, as Phil had mentioned earlier. The Pearl Mini, you're looking about $34.95. So you're looking about $3,500. But you're dealing with a difference between the webcaster is a great, simple tool, but it's more of a consumer-oriented tool, where the Pearl Mini is a professional piece of kit. And it's built that way, it's engineered that way, and it does much more than a webcaster can. So it definitely does justify that extra price. And then the Pearl Mini, or the Pearl 2, sorry, does a little more than twice what the Pearl Mini does, and it's priced accordingly.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, nothing to be ashamed about. You got some good products. And,
No, exactly. And we see them not only in churches, but professional AV situations. I know we talked with you guys a while back about Infocom in Orlando back in June. And, we talked to a lot of churches there, actually. But the company that runs conferences like that, they're customers of ours with products like the Pearl 2, and they'll go into an environment like that and do all the recording of all the keynote speeches and things like that with a product like the Pearl 2. So it's designed for that environment.
Right. And then beyond that, you also have some USB video capture devices.
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we have the AVIO line of USB capture cards. Again, we have HD ones, 4K ones, and they're great complements for people who are looking to use the Wirecast and the vMix software-based solutions, but still bring in those high-quality camera signals over HDMI and SDI and up to 4K. We have options for all of those.
Good deal. All right, so sorry to be the timekeeper here, but we are out of time. And I just really appreciate you, George, appreciate your team. Just as I said at the beginning of the podcast, great support. And this has certainly been a geeky podcast for those of you who are geeks out there. So George Herbert has been our guest. He's with Epiphan. Epiphan spelled Epiphan. Did I get that right?
Correct, yeah.
And you can just Google Epiphan. If you have questions, again, we're giving away a Webcaster X2 if you stream with us for the first time and commit to being with us for a year or so. And some of you might be listening going, well, that's great. We've been streaming with you for 5 years. Well, we do have a nice referral program. So if you have some church leaders or church friends, you can, this sounds like an infomercial, but we'll let it be that way. If you want to recommend us to your friends out there, we have a generous referral program as well. So anyhow, we're out of time. George, again, thank you so much for spending this time with us today.
My pleasure.
All right. And if you want to get a hold of George, you can just Google Epiphan and go to customer support. That's probably a way. Or you can just send us an email. Just send it to support@streamingchurch.tv. And we will either forward that to George, or again, we can maybe help you if you have any questions about streaming video. So we are done. Thanks again, George. The other guy there is Steve Lacy. I'm Phil Thompson, and thank you for spending a little bit of time with us today on the Church Solutions Podcast. We'll catch you next time. Have a great day.